You're not burned out because you're doing too much. If you've been pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion, yet you still can't give yourself permission to stop, not because you want more, but because you're afraid that if you slow down, everything will fall apart. Then, stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand your own exhaustion. There's a truth that very few people ever tell us. You're not burned out because you're doing too much. You're burned out because you've never truly felt that you were allowed to stop. Have you ever sat perfectly still in front of your screen, watching the blinking cursor in the silence, as if every ounce of energy and every thought had completely drained from your mind? Or stared at a project you've spent weeks, maybe even months creating, only to feel an emptiness you couldn't quite explain, instead of the pride you thought you'd feel? Then you open your to-do list. Every task feels like another stone placed on your shoulders. You know you have to keep going. You know there's still so much left to do. So you tell yourself, I need to work harder. I need to become better. I need to reach the next milestone. But the harder you push, the farther that destination seems to move away. And then, in the silence, a quiet voice begins to speak. It doesn't criticize you. It doesn't shout. It simply whispers, maybe I'm still not good enough. And maybe I've just never been truly lucky. If you've ever heard that voice, please know this. You're not alone. Millions of people carry that same silent conversation inside themselves every single day. And what's happening to you is not weakness, is not a lack of discipline, and it's certainly not because you don't have what it takes. What's happening runs much deeper than that. Imagine someone running for their life from a tiger. Their heart is racing. Their breathing is rapid. Every muscle in their body is tense. In that moment, what do you think the brain cares about most? Creating something meaningful? Planning for the future? Solving a complex problem? Of course not. The brain has only one priority: survival. The problem is, your brain today operates almost the same way it did thousands of years ago. It doesn't clearly distinguish between a tiger charging through the forest and an email from your boss at midnight, an unpaid loan, a stack of overdue bills, or the fear of falling behind everyone else. To your brain, they're all potential threats, and the moment it senses danger, it switches into survival mode. That's why you suddenly become anxious. Why it's harder to concentrate, harder to make decisions, harder to think creatively, harder to enjoy the things that once made you happy. The more you force yourself to keep working, the more your body begins to resist. The harder you try to prove your worth, the louder your anxiety becomes. Psychologists have discovered something remarkable. A healthy amount of pressure can actually improve performance. It helps us focus. It motivates us to act, but only up to a certain point. Beyond that point, performance doesn't continue to rise. It begins to decline. Then it falls even further, until eventually, we burn out. This phenomenon is known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. It explains why someone working 12 hours a day can sometimes accomplish far less than someone working only 6 hours with a calm and regulated mind. We've been taught our entire lives that the harder you work, the the more successful you'll become. But science tells a different story. When your nervous system becomes overwhelmed, your brain stops prioritizing growth. It starts prioritizing survival, and then life adds even more weight to your shoulders. Financial pressure, bills, family, children, aging parents, the people who depend on you. Every responsibility feels like another stone dropped into the backpack you're carrying. At first, you can still keep walking. Then the weight becomes heavier. Slowly, you lose your joy. You lose your peace. And one day, you look at yourself in the mirror and quietly wonder, when did I become this person? Maybe you haven't changed at all. Maybe you've simply been carrying too much for far too long. And this is the heartbreaking paradox. The harder you work to prove your worth, the harder it becomes to produce your best work. You're trying to solve complex problems with a nervous system that's behaving as if it's still running from a wild animal. That's why you always feel busy, yet never feel like you're truly moving forward. Not because you're lazy, not because you're incapable, not because you're untalented, but because your body has been trapped in survival mode for far too long. But this still isn't the deepest layer of the story, because there's something else, something that keeps so many people from stopping, even when they're completely exhausted. It's an invisible mask, one that many of us have been wearing for years without even realizing it. In the next chapter, we'll explore what Carl Jung called the persona, and perhaps, for the very first time, you'll begin to understand that what has been driving your life was never ambition. It was fear, quietly growing in the background for much longer than you ever imagined.